Hey everyone, Ken here, your training and development specialist with Nebraska VR, here to present a short tutorial on some of the accessibility features available to you in Microsoft Word. But before we start going into those details, I do want to provide a brief disclaimer that before we produce anything that's going to be distributed to the public or to our shared populations, always look first to see what is available in web forms. The web forms is an area where we house many of the letters and different documents that we have in place for distribution, so it's always recommended that you look there first before producing anything that may be duplicative. So now I'll share my screen so we can take a look at some of the accessibility features in Microsoft Word. So on this screen, you'll see some of the information taken from the main Nebraska VR website. So this includes a graphic and some of the information on our purpose, mission, and our values guiding principles. So a shout out to Sarah that this information, although it was taken from the website, I have altered it for today's demonstration, and this is not exactly how it appears on the main website. But to locate some of the instances in this document where we might want to review the accessibility, we all will have the feature under review, and then we'll have an icon that says check accessibility. So when you click on that icon, what will appear are a couple or a few options in which it will highlight which areas to cover first within your document to check for accessibility. The very first one is going to appear would be errors. The second one would be warnings. Errors are the indicated content that people with disabilities are unable to read, and the warnings would indicate content that people with disabilities find it difficult to read. So you always want to address the errors first. So for this example, under errors, what we have is that I am missing alternative text and it appears in one instance. So what's great about this feature is that when we click on that option, we may have to click the caret or the drop down to choose which option to fix. It'll take us directly towards the item that needs change. So in this case, the Nebraska VR logo. So if we scroll down to the bottom, we'll see why this area needs to be fixed. And then we will also see different steps that we can take in order to make that change. So for this example, what it wants us to do is right click, go to view alt text, and then what we'll see here is that we could include 1 to 2 detailed sentences, which is recommended, so that if this were to be picked up by a screen reader, it can be effectively described to someone who may have low vision, vision impairment, or who would use a screen reader to read the documents on this screen. So for this instance, what we can do is include a brief statement, such as this being an image of the Nebraska VR logo on a white background, and then that will save automatically so that we can just hit the X button, and then that issue is solved. So now when this document is finalized and prepared, whether it's in Word or a PDF format, if the individual were to hover over this image, that description would appear, or if a screen reader were to read it, then that information would be shared out loud. Now another example here is going to be warnings. So under warnings, we do have 3 instances where we do have hard to read text. And if we click onto that drop down, we see that under purpose, under mission, and under values and guiding principles. So one thing to always remember that as we create these documents, that we always want to make sure that we have legible readability. So this is looking at the different colors that might be used to represent the contrast and how our vision can identify certain words against a white background. So with this coloring, we see that the yellow does not appear as sharp as it could against a white background, where the recommendation to help fix this problem would be to make sure that anytime we are writing a document, that it always be with standard black lettering. And then as you see, the inspection results, the accessibility features are met under the review for accessibility with that icon. Now, what I do also want to note here is that the accessibility checker will not check every single item on a document. There will be some things that we will need to do our own due diligence to ensure that we are being as accessible as we can within the items that we produce, at least with the written documentation. So while we're still on this screen, one thing I do want to highlight that the accessibility checker will not check is our font. So when we consider font in anything that we produce, we always want to make sure that it's going to be at a readable size so that anyone with low vision can also be able to read this. So here we can see, compared to the other sentences, we have quite a small font, where what we can do is just increase that to match with the other examples here. So in that case, this was set at 10.5, and then we can increase it so that it matches the rest. Now, another item to be mindful of is going to be the types of fonts we use. So as you can see at the bottom, we have four examples, one in Helvetica, one in Arial, one in Times New Roman, and one in Brush Script. So whenever we produce materials, we want to think about the readability and the sharpness of fonts so that others are able to read it against a white background. So the common practice would be to use fonts that have sharper lines such as Helvetica and Arial. We want to avoid other fonts such as Times New Roman and Brush Script, where the lettering is more closely together and may have different additions so that it may appear harder to read and the sharpness will be reduced. So another thing to consider is going to be the audience. So whenever we're producing any written materials, you want to think about who you're catering to so that that readability can come through in terms of content. So an item that can also be displayed on Microsoft Word, if we scroll to the bottom, you'll see this ribbon below where we have different options to choose from. So if we click on the icon that has the book with the check, that is going to be our spell check. But another item that we'll see here is insights. So if you click on document stats, what will appear is a pop-up in which we would want to click OK to continue to calculate the stats for this page. And then on that pop-up, it's going to give us readability statistics, where two items that we can focus on are the Flesch reading ease and the Flesch Kincaid grade level. So both of these indicate the type of words and sentence structures that we use in this document so that it gives a somewhat estimated portrayal of the grade level and readability for the language that's used within the content. So for this example, the reading ease is at a 38.9, where for the general public is more closely aligned to 60. You want to have a higher number than you do lower. And the Flesch Kincaid grade level is a 10.7, indicating about grade 10 in terms of US standards of educational level. Where for a general audience, you would want to tailor it more towards an 8. And then for our specific population, working with those with disabilities and intellectual disabilities, we might want to consider going a bit lower. So of course, as we produce these materials, you will know your audience best. So as you're writing or gathering your content, you could always structure in a way that's going to suit the audience that you're writing for. Right, and that brings us to the conclusion of today's short tutorial on accessibility features within Microsoft Word. So I hope you have a great day, and thank you for your time.